You ever notice how a dog can save you without saying a single word? That's where this story begins. Not with a hero in uniform, but with a German shepherd standing in the rain beside a broken child. One bark, one heartbeat, and everything changed. We talk a lot about courage, medals, headlines, glory. But sometimes courage looks like quiet eyes, muddy paws, and a loyalty that never asks for anything back. This isn't just a story about a police dog. It's about why we need them, and how their love reaches places therapy and words can't. I've spent years studying what makes dogs, especially German shepherds, so emotionally in tune with us. And what I've learned will change the way you see your own dog forever. Because when you watch this video, you'll discover the real reason human-animal bonds are so powerful, and how, with just a bit of awareness, you can build that same unspoken trust with your own companion. Stay with me to the end. You won't just hear a story, you'll feel it, deep in that quiet place where love, loyalty, and healing all live together. The rain had been falling for hours. Thick, relentless sheets that turned Riverside County's back streets into rivers of silver under the glow of flickering streetlights. Water streamed down rusted fire escapes, pooling in the cracked asphalt. The hum of the storm drowned out the city's usual noises, until a faint, desperate cry cut through the night. Officer Daniel Hayes froze mid-step, his flashlight slicing through the mist. Beside him, Rex, his German shepherd partner, stiffened, ears high, tail rigid, nostrils flaring. That sound again, a child's sob, thin and quivering. "Rex, search," Daniel whispered, voice low but sharp with focus. The command was instinctive, born of years together in patrol cars and training yards. Rex darted forward, paws splashing through puddles, his black and tan coat slick with rain. His nose swept the air, weaving between the scent of garbage, oil, and something else, something raw and human. Daniel followed, boots heavy on wet concrete, every sense on edge. The alley narrowed into darkness, a place where streetlights didn't reach, and hope seemed to fade out with the rain. Somewhere inside that darkness, a child was crying. "Rex, steady," he murmured again, adjusting his flashlight. Then, he saw her. At the far end of the alley, curled against a dumpster, was a small figure, a girl no older than 9, her hair plastered to her face, her arms hugging her knees. She trembled violently, her clothes torn, one sneaker missing. Mud and rain streaked across her pale skin. For a moment she flinched at the beam of light, shielding her face. Hey, you're okay," Daniel said softly, kneeling down, his tone shifting from command to care. "I'm Officer Hayes. This is Rex. We're here to help you, sweetheart." Rex stood guard a few feet away, body tense, eyes locked on the mouth of the alley. Every muscle seemed coiled, ready. The faint growl in his chest wasn't anger, it was protection. The girl's voice came out small and broken. "Please, don't let him find me." Daniel's heart clenched. He pulled off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Her skin was ice cold, and the moment the fabric touched her, she clutched it as if it were a lifeline. "You're safe now," he assured, glancing toward Rex. "He's not going to hurt you again, I promise." A sudden crack of thunder shook the air. The girl whimpered, shrinking closer to the wall. Daniel crouched lower, flashlight catching a glimpse of her scraped knees. Fresh cuts mixed with older bruises. Someone had hurt her. Recently. "Emily," she whispered when he asked her name. "Emily Carter." The name barely left her lips before Rex lifted his head, sniffing toward the other end of the alley. A low bark, short, urgent, echoed through the rain. Daniel's hand went to his holster. "Rex, hold," he ordered, scanning the shadows. A dark silhouette had just disappeared around the corner. Too fast to identify, but enough to make Daniel's instincts flare. He reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 7. I've got a possible victim, female child, age approximately 9, found at Maple and 3rd, requesting immediate backup and medical." Static. Then a faint acknowledgement. Backup was on the way. Daniel turned back to Emily. Her eyes, large, brown, filled with something between fear and disbelief, fixed on Rex. The dog approached slowly, lowering himself to the ground, ears back, tail low. He didn't bark, didn't push, just rested his muzzle gently near her knee. Emily reached out with trembling fingers and touched his head. For the first time, her breathing steadied. The storm still howled, but something in that small contact, a child's trust and a dog's unspoken promise, made the world seem momentarily still. Daniel watched quietly. He'd seen Rex disarm violent suspects, sniff out narcotics, track fugitives across miles of wilderness. But this, the way the dog calmed a terrified little girl without a single word, was a different kind of heroism. "You see that?" he said softly, half to himself. "He's on your side, Emily. Always will be." Her eyes flicked up to his face. "You won't leave me?" He shook his head. "Not a chance. You're safe now. Rex and I, we've got you." The rain lightened into a mist, but the air still carried tension, as if the night itself were holding its breath. Somewhere in the distance, sirens began to wail, a thin, rising song through the storm. Daniel wrapped Emily in a thermal blanket from his pack, lifting her carefully into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. Rex trotted beside them, never once breaking his scan of the surroundings. When they reached the patrol car, Daniel opened the back door, easing Emily inside. The warmth of the heater fogged the windows, and she looked dazed, as if waking from a nightmare she wasn't sure had ended. Rex climbed in next to her, sitting upright, watchful. Emily leaned against him without hesitation. "Good boy," Daniel murmured, patting Rex's shoulder before sliding into the driver's seat. The rain on the windshield blurred the world into streaks of silver and light. As he radioed in the details, his voice was calm, professional, but inside something twisted. He'd seen too many nights like this, too many broken children, too many unanswered questions. He glanced in the rearview mirror. Emily's small fingers still gripped Rex's fur. The dog's amber eyes met Daniel's in the reflection. Steady, focused, almost human in their understanding. Somewhere deep down, Daniel felt it. This wasn't just another case. It was the beginning of something bigger, darker. A truth buried beneath kindness and credentials, waiting to be uncovered. The sirens grew louder. Backup was close. But as Daniel pulled away from the alley, a flicker of movement caught his eye in the mirror. A lone figure at the alley's mouth, half shrouded in the storm, watching them leave. By the time he turned the car around, the figure was gone. Only the echo of the rain remained, and through the downpour, Rex's ears twitched, alert and unblinking. His gaze stayed fixed on the darkness receding behind them, foreshadowing the storm that was still to come. The fluorescent lights of the Riverside County Police Precinct hummed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the squad room. The rain had finally eased outside, but its rhythm still echoed faintly against the windows. A dull percussion that matched the fatigue in Officer Daniel Hayes's chest. He sat hunched at his desk, uniform still damp from the night's downpour, the smell of wet fur clinging to the air. Rex lay beside him, silent and watchful. The German shepherd's head rested on his paws, eyes half-lidded yet alert, always alert. The canine's ears twitched at every sound, the squeak of shoes on linoleum, the rattle of keyboards, the distant ring of a phone in the dispatch office. Across the room, forensics tech Marcy Liu approached with a manila folder in hand. Her face was pale from lack of sleep, latex gloves still faintly powdered. "Preliminary findings from the alley," she said, placing the folder on Daniel's desk. "We found traces of medical-grade adhesive, the kind used in wound dressings. Also, small bits of gauze fibers, consistent with hospital supplies." Daniel's brows furrowed. "So, someone with access to medical stock?" "Exactly," Marcy replied. "Could be a doctor, nurse, someone working in supply. The quality's high grade. Definitely not street junk." Rex lifted his head at the word medical, eyes narrowing slightly. His nose twitched, remembering the scent from the night before. Daniel absently reached down to pat him. "You remember, huh?" The dog let out a low rumble, not threatening, but uneasy. Marcy noticed. "He's picking up something?" "He always does," Daniel replied quietly. "Sometimes before I do." Just then, the door to the briefing room opened. Detective Laura Miller stepped out. Crisp blazer, hair tied back, eyes sharp with both intellect and empathy. She'd built her reputation on reading between the lines, of reports, of people, of silence. "Hayes," she greeted, offering a nod. "Heard you found the girl. Good work out there." "Thanks, Detective." Daniel straightened. "She's at Riverside General now. The doctors said she's stable, but shaken." Laura leaned on his desk, flipping open the folder Marcy had left. Her eyes scanned the evidence sheets. Medical adhesive, gauze. That's not random. Someone cleaned her wounds before abandoning her. Why? Daniel exhaled slowly. Maybe to hide DNA, or maybe... He hesitated. Maybe guilt. She looked up at him. "You think it's someone with a conscience?" "I think it's someone who wanted her alive but quiet." Silence filled the space, thick and uneasy. Outside, thunder grumbled again, distant but persistent. Laura turned another page and paused. "Emily mentioned something during initial questioning," she said. "Said she smelled something like a hospital, disinfectant, latex." "That matches the forensics," Daniel said. "Except she also said she saw a white coat," Laura added. "But the alley was pitch black. No way she saw color clearly." Daniel frowned. Maybe her memory's mixed. Trauma does that. Laura nodded, but her eyes lingered on him, testing his certainty. Or maybe she's remembering flashes, faces, someone familiar. At that, Rex stood suddenly, tail stiff. His gaze locked on a stack of photos laid out on the desk, suspect profiles from recent cases involving medical professionals. The canine's nose hovered over one in particular. Dr. Alan Brooks, mid-40s, chief surgeon at Riverside Memorial, smiling headshot, polished, trusted. Rex's reaction was subtle at first. Ears angled forward, nostrils flaring. Then came a sharp huff, a low growl rumbling deep in his chest. Daniel froze. "Rex, sit." But the dog didn't move. His gaze stayed fixed on Brooks's photo, a sound rising in his throat, part warning, part instinct. Laura arched an eyebrow. "He doesn't like him." Daniel exhaled. "He doesn't like a lot of people." "Yeah, but that's not random," she said, crouching near Rex. "He's reacting to something specific. Maybe the scent on the photo, or a trace chemical from the evidence box?" Daniel leaned closer to the folder, flipping through the inventory sheet. His eyes caught a small note. Sample of gauze cross-referenced with Riverside Memorial Supply Batch. There it was again. Riverside Memorial. Dr. Brooks's hospital. Rex barked once, sharp and decisive. "Easy, partner," Daniel murmured. But something cold slid down his spine. He'd learned over the years that Rex's instincts were rarely wrong. The dog had once tracked a missing child through 3 miles of forest, ignoring every false trail. Whatever he sensed now, it wasn't coincidence. Laura straightened. "We'll need to interview Brooks, quietly. No media. He's too well connected." Daniel nodded, jaw tight. "He's respected. Charity work, hospital boards, volunteer programs. If we go after him without solid proof, we lose credibility," Laura finished. "And may be the case." The 2 officers stood there, the hum of the precinct filling the silence. Papers fluttered in the air conditioning. Somewhere, a coffee machine hissed. Daniel sat back, rubbing his temples. "Emily's story is all fragments. We've got medical residue, hospital ties, but nothing placing him at the scene." Laura's voice softened. "We'll find the link. But Hayes, don't let your gut lead before the facts. I know you trust Rex, but courts don't." Daniel glanced down. Rex was lying beside the desk again, but one paw, slow, deliberate, reached forward and tapped the corner of the file folder labeled Brooks. It wasn't random. The motion was quiet, almost reverent, as if the dog were insisting on being heard in his own wordless way. Daniel stared at that paw for a long moment. Around him, the precinct noise faded, replaced by the distant sound of rain starting again outside. He thought of Emily's tiny hand gripping Rex's fur, the fear in her voice, the sterile smell she remembered. He looked at the folder again, the clean smile of a doctor who healed people for a living. Logic said, wait for evidence. Instinct said, trust the dog. And in that uneasy gap between the two, Daniel felt the weight of everything pressing down. The badge, the law, the system, and the silent loyalty sitting faithfully by his side. Laura's voice broke the stillness. "You okay?" He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just thinking." She gave a half smile. "Don't think too hard. Sometimes the truth hides in plain sight." When she left, Daniel stayed seated. He picked up the file labeled Dr. Alan Brooks and turned it over in his hands. The edges were already damp from where Rex's paw had rested. The rain outside grew heavier, pounding against the windows in steady rhythm. Rex shifted closer, eyes unwavering, and let out a quiet exhale that almost sounded like a sigh. Daniel looked down at him, voice barely above a whisper. "You think it's him, don't you?" The dog didn't move, didn't blink, just stared back with the kind of certainty only animals seem to have, the kind that doesn't need proof to be true. Daniel closed the folder, his hand lingering on the name, Dr. Alan Brooks. And for the first time that night, doubt gave way to something else. Not belief, not yet, but a whisper of trust, in instinct, in loyalty, in the quiet bond between man and dog that no rulebook could ever measure. The rain outside roared louder, echoing through the halls like a warning. And in that sound, Daniel felt it. Something was coming. Something that would test them all. The small therapy room at Riverside General Hospital smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. Outside, the storm from the previous night had calmed, but inside, the air still carried a heaviness. That quiet, fragile space where fear lingers long after danger has passed. Emily Carter sat on the edge of a cushioned chair too big for her, legs swinging but not touching the floor. Her eyes were unfocused, glassy with exhaustion. The therapist's voice, gentle and patient, barely reached her. "Emily, can you tell me what you remember about that night?" The little girl's hands clenched the hem of her hospital gown. A long pause stretched between them. Then a whisper, barely audible. "There was light, bright, and cold." The therapist nodded softly. "You're doing great. What else, sweetheart?" Emily blinked rapidly, and in that moment, the world behind her eyes began to unravel. Flashbacks, fragmented, disjointed, flickered through her memory like broken film reels. A white coat leaning over her, the sharp, sterile smell of disinfectant, the hum of fluorescent lights, and somewhere in that brightness, a muffled scream, hers, swallowed by a gloved hand. She gasped, her body jerking as the memory hit her like a wave. The therapist leaned forward. "It's okay, Emily. You're safe now." But Emily wasn't listening. Her breaths came shallow and fast. The edges of the room blurred. She pressed her palms over her ears as if trying to drown out echoes only she could hear. Outside the glass wall, Detective Laura Miller watched silently, arms folded, her face tight with empathy. Beside her stood Officer Daniel Hayes, jaw set, eyes fixed on the little girl. At his side, Rex sat perfectly still, ears perked, golden eyes locked on Emily through the glass. "She's shutting down again," Laura murmured. Daniel nodded. "She's trapped in it. That kind of trauma doesn't just fade. It digs in." The therapist gave a small signal through the glass. A shrug. She was losing the child's attention. Rex let out a soft whine, low and barely audible. His nose brushed against the glass door as he looked toward Daniel. Daniel's gaze flicked to Laura. "Let me try something." Before she could respond, he cracked open the door. The faint creak of the hinges made Emily glance up. The moment she saw the brown and black shape entering, her breathing hitched, then softened. "Hey, sweetheart," Daniel said softly, keeping his tone even, warm. "You remember Rex, don't you?" Rex padded into the room, paws silent on the tile. He didn't approach too fast, didn't bark. He just stopped a few feet away, tail low, head tilted, waiting. Emily stared at him, wary at first, then drawn in, as though the world outside her fear had suddenly found a point of light. Slowly, she slid off the chair and knelt on the floor. Rex lowered himself too, belly to the ground, inching closer in quiet patience. When he reached her, she hesitated, then, with a trembling hand, touched his fur. The contact broke something open. Not fear, but release. Tears welled up and spilled over her cheeks. She buried her face in Rex's neck, small arms wrapping around him. He didn't move, didn't pull away, just pressed his nose gently against her shoulder, breathing with her. From the doorway, Laura exhaled, her voice low. "He's grounding her." Daniel nodded, eyes softening. "He always does." The therapist stepped back, watching silently. The room that had been tight with tension now felt different, lighter, almost holy in its quietness. Emily whispered something against Rex's fur. Daniel knelt beside her. "What was that, sweetheart?" She hesitated, voice barely a whisper. "He knows. The bad man." Daniel's heart clenched. "Rex knows?" She nodded, pulling back just enough to look at the dog's calm, steady eyes. "He knows who hurt me. He looked at his picture. He knew." Daniel exchanged a glance with Laura. The same name crossing both their minds. Dr. Alan Brooks. But neither said it aloud. Not here. Not now. Daniel said softly, "Rex's job is to protect people. He listens, He feels. He doesn't forget. Emily wiped her nose. He's not scared. No, Daniel said, because he's brave for you. The therapist crouched nearby, careful not to intrude. Emily, you're very brave too. The girl shook her head, voice breaking. I was scared. I didn't scream. I couldn't. Daniel placed a hand on her shoulder. Being scared doesn't mean you weren't brave. You survived. That's what matters. The room fell silent again, except for the rhythmic sound of Rex's breathing. He'd shifted just slightly, his body leaning against Emily's side, a silent wall between her and the world. Laura watched through misted eyes. He's doing more therapy than any of us could. Daniel smiled faintly. Yeah, and he doesn't even ask the hard questions. The therapist nodded. That's why she trusts him. No judgment, no pressure. Minutes passed like that. No words, just the soft, healing rhythm of presence. The child's sobs faded into steady breaths. The tightness in her shoulders eased. When she finally looked up, her eyes weren't wide with fear anymore. They were tired, but calmer. Can he stay? She asked. Daniel nodded. As long as you need. Emily leaned back against the wall, Rex beside her, one paw resting gently across her leg, a silent oath of loyalty. Laura stepped closer to Daniel, her voice low. You feel that? What? The shift, she said. Like something broke loose. Not the fear, the hold it had on her. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah. It's the first time she's looked at someone without flinching. Laura crossed her arms. Maybe that's how healing starts. Not through words, through connection. Daniel's eyes lingered on Emily. Through trust. Outside, the afternoon sun pushed through the clouds, streaking gold light through the blinds. Dust motes danced in the air, and for the first time since the night of the rescue, the world inside that small room didn't feel trapped in shadow. Emily began to hum quietly, a tune without words, carrying something pure, the faint sound of a child remembering safety. Rex lifted his head, ears twitching, as if listening. Daniel smiled faintly. You've got good taste, partner. The therapist gathered her notes, whispering to Laura, We can continue next session. I think this is enough for today. Laura nodded. Yeah, let her rest. Daniel rose slowly, giving Rex a light pat. Stay with her. The dog didn't move. His gaze followed Daniel, but his body stayed planted beside Emily. As Daniel and Laura stepped out into the hallway, the sound of the door closing behind them felt less like an ending and more like a beginning. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself a breath of cautious hope. Inside the room, Emily's small hand still rested on Rex's back. She whispered softly, almost to herself, You found me once. You'll find him too. Rex's ears flicked at her voice, his tail giving a single quiet thump against the floor. And through the afternoon light, his eyes gleamed with that unshakable, wordless promise, the kind only a loyal heart could keep. The rain had stopped, leaving the night unnervingly still. Officer Daniel Hayes sat alone in his small living room, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling beside him. The faint hum of the refrigerator, the only sound breaking the silence. The room smelled faintly of leather, damp fur, and coffee, the familiar scent of long shifts and late hours. On the TV screen in front of him, old footage flickered, grainy K-9 training sessions from years ago. The camera shook slightly, shot by a rookie who'd wanted to document the new handler and his partner. The younger Daniel in the video was full of energy, laughter echoing off the training field. Good boy, Rex. That's my guy. His voice carried confidence, that unshakable certainty of a man who believed in purpose more than policy. Rex, smaller than, still in early training, was bounding across the field, ears flopping, chasing after a decoy suspect with fierce determination. Even through the static, Daniel could hear the sharpness in the dog's bark, the loyalty in his eyes. Now, years later, those same eyes watched from beside the couch. Rex lay curled on the rug, fur glinting gold under the lamplight, head resting on his paws. His chest rose and fell in steady rhythm. Daniel muted the TV and leaned back, running a hand through his hair. The silence was thick with questions he couldn't shake. He replayed everything in his mind. Emily's trembling words, the evidence, the picture of Dr. Alan Brooks, and the way Rex had reacted. That instinctive, visceral growl. It wasn't the first time the dog had picked up on something no one else noticed. But it might be the first time that instinct could change the course of a case this serious. And that's what terrified Daniel. The sharp ring of his phone cut through the quiet. He hesitated, then answered. Hayes. A familiar voice crackled through the line. Officer Hayes, this is Captain Reynolds, Internal Affairs. You got a minute? Daniel straightened, tension seeping into his shoulders. Yes, sir. I've been reviewing your case notes from the Carter file, Reynolds said. Your report heavily emphasizes the K-9's reaction to certain evidence, particularly the suspect's photograph. I need to remind you, behavioral indicators aren't admissible in court. I'm aware, Daniel replied quietly. Then why rely on it? Look, Hayes, I respect what you and that dog have done for this department, but you know as well as I do, intuition doesn't hold up against cross-examination, especially not from defense counsel as aggressive as this one. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Sir, Rex's instincts have solved cases that human logic couldn't. He's not guessing. He's trained to detect patterns, scent, chemical traces, stress responses. Reynolds sighed. I'm not questioning his training. I'm questioning your judgment if you keep letting it drive the case. Daniel's jaw clenched. You think I'm letting emotion cloud my work? I think you're letting loyalty override procedure, Reynolds said flatly. And that's dangerous. For you. For the case, for that girl. A long silence followed. Daniel could hear the faint hum of the line, could almost feel the distance between them. Finally, the captain's voice softened. You're a good cop, Hayes, but don't let your heart write your report. We don't convict with instincts. We convict with evidence. The line clicked dead. Daniel sat there, phone still in his hand, eyes locked on the dark screen. His reflection stared back, tired, older, uncertain. Across the room, Rex stirred, sensing the shift in energy. He stood, padded over, and rested his head against Daniel's knee. Daniel let out a shaky breath. They don't get it, do they? Rex blinked, silent and steady. They think you're just a dog, Daniel said softly. Just a tool. But you saw her that night. The way she trusted you. The way you found her. You knew something was wrong before anyone else did. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. And now they want me to pretend that doesn't matter. He turned his eyes toward the muted TV where the footage was looping again. Younger Daniel stood beside a younger Rex, both drenched in sunlight and certainty. A voice from off-camera, the old K-9 instructor, echoed faintly through the static. You'll know when you've got a real partner, Hayes, because you'll stop seeing him as a tool and start seeing him as a reflection of yourself. Daniel let the words sink in. He'd built his career on that truth. Rex wasn't a pet. He wasn't a piece of equipment. He was family, a partner in every sense of the word, one who never lied, never doubted, never left. He looked down. Rex was watching him with those same amber eyes, the same quiet intelligence that had carried them through years of rescues, arrests, and darkness. Daniel smiled faintly, the kind that carried more pain than joy. "They don't believe you, buddy," he whispered. "But I do." Rex tilted his head, as if understanding every word. Outside, wind rustled through the trees. The faint hum of a passing car broke the stillness, then faded again into silence. Daniel reached down, running his fingers through Rex's fur. "We're walking a fine line, aren't we? One wrong move, and they'll say we broke protocol. One right move, and maybe, just maybe, that girl gets justice." Rex let out a quiet sigh and lay down fully, his head resting on Daniel's lap. His breathing was slow, steady, a rhythm that seemed to sync with Daniel's own heartbeat. The clock on the wall ticked softly, marking the passage of another sleepless night. Daniel leaned back, eyes unfocused, memories drifting through his mind. He saw flashes. His first day as a K-9 handler, the field training, the first time Rex disobeyed an order only to save his life. The moment he realized this animal wasn't just following commands. He was thinking, deciding, choosing to protect. The kind of loyalty that couldn't be taught. He reached over and muted the old footage entirely. The room went quiet again. The world felt smaller, simpler. Just a man, a dog, and the silence between them. "Whatever happens," he said softly, more to himself than to anyone, "we stick to what's right, not what's easy." Rex didn't move. He didn't have to. His presence said everything words couldn't. The same steady faith that had guided them through every storm. Daniel's eyes grew heavy, but his thoughts didn't rest. Doubt still lingered, sharp and heavy, but somewhere beneath it, something steadier burned. The belief that truth has its own language, and sometimes it doesn't need to be spoken at all. He looked down one last time before closing his eyes. Rex's gaze was on him, unblinking, loyal. "Yeah," Daniel murmured, his hand still on the dog's fur. "You and me, partner. Always." The lamp flickered softly, throwing long shadows across the wall, the silhouettes of man and dog side by side. Outside, the world slept. Inside, faith kept its quiet vigil. And beneath the weight of uncertainty, loyalty held fast, silent, steady, unbreakable. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and anxiety. Morning light filtered through the tall, dust-streaked windows, painting pale stripes across the benches where reporters shuffled their notes and whispered among themselves. The hum of quiet tension filled the air, that uneasy calm that always settled before a trial began. Officer Daniel Hayes sat near the back of the courtroom, posture straight but jaw tense. Beside him, Rex lay at his feet, the German shepherd's amber eyes sweeping the room like a sentinel. Every sound, the creak of a chair, the rustle of papers, the nervous sigh of a witness, drew a faint twitch of his ears. At the front, Prosecutor Sarah Bennett was arranging her files, lips pressed tightly together. She was sharp, composed, the kind of woman who could slice through lies with her words, but even she couldn't hide the strain behind her eyes. The case had drawn attention from every corner of Riverside County. A respected doctor accused of assaulting a child was the kind of story that split a town in two. Across the aisle, Dr. Alan Brooks sat with his defense team, expression calm, almost pitying. His tailored suit, silver cufflinks, and soft, sympathetic demeanor painted the image of a man falsely accused, a man of standing, wronged by circumstance. And between those two worlds sat Emily Carter, small and fragile in the witness stand. Her legs barely reached the footrest, and the microphone looked too big for her trembling hands. The courtroom lights seemed too harsh on her pale face. "Emily," Sarah began gently, stepping closer. "Can you tell us what happened the night Officer Hayes and Rex found you?" The little girl looked down at her lap. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I was scared." "That's okay," Sarah said softly. "Take your time." Emily's eyes darted toward the gallery where Daniel sat. The moment her gaze found Rex, something in her shoulders eased. The dog's ears perked slightly, and he lowered his head, as if acknowledging her silent call for strength. "I was in a place that smelled like medicine," Emily continued. "There were lights, bright ones, and a man. He told me to be quiet." Sarah nodded slowly. "Do you see that man here today?" Emily hesitated. Her small finger lifted, trembling slightly, and pointed across the room, toward Dr. Brooks. A ripple of whispers spread through the room. Camera shutters clicked like faint thunder. The defense attorney, Mark Keller, was on his feet before Sarah could speak. "Objection, Your Honor, leading the witness. She's a child. Her memory has been influenced by months of questioning." Judge Morrison sighed, adjusting his glasses. "Sustained. Counselor, please rephrase." Sarah clenched her jaw, but nodded. "Emily, can you tell me why you pointed to that man?" Emily frowned slightly, her eyes unfocused, as if looking through fog. "Because he had a coat, and there was something on his hands. Red. I think—" Her voice faltered. She pressed her palms against her temples. "I don't remember." The defense attorney seized the moment. "You don't remember, do you, sweetheart? Maybe you saw someone else that night. It was dark. You were frightened." Sarah's tone hardened. "Objection, badgering the witness." "Sustained," the judge said, frowning. But the damage was done. Emily's breathing turned shallow again. Her lips trembled. She looked lost. A small child in a sea of adults, all talking about truth and evidence while she just tried to remember how to breathe. Daniel's hands tightened on his knees. Times 400 maison. He could feel it. That moment when trauma pulled her back under, drowning her in memory. "Emily," Sarah said softly, trying to bring her back. "You're safe here. No one can hurt you." But the child wasn't listening. Her eyes had gone glassy. "He told me not to tell," she whispered. He said no one would believe me." Her voice cracked, and the room went still. For a moment, the sound of a clock ticking echoed through the air, sharp and intrusive. Then the judge cleared his throat gently. "We'll take a brief recess if necessary." But before Sarah could respond, Rex let out a sound, low, mournful, resonant. It wasn't a bark, it wasn't a growl, it was something deeper, a whine, a sound of empathy, of recognition. Every head in the courtroom turned toward the back. Emily froze, then looked up, her eyes locking on Rex's. The faintest flicker of calm returned to her face. The judge frowned but didn't speak. Even he seemed reluctant to interrupt whatever was happening. Rex didn't move. He didn't bark again. He just stayed still. Gaze unwavering, presence quiet but powerful, like he was reminding the girl of something she already knew. Sarah caught it immediately. "Emily," she said softly, following the connection. "You're not alone, remember? Who helped you that night?" Emily blinked, tears glistening on her lashes. "Rex did." A faint murmur swept through the gallery. Sarah's voice steadied. And did Rex ever hurt you? No, Emily said, shaking her head. He found me. He protected me. Sarah nodded. Then trust that feeling, sweetheart. You're safe now. You can tell us what you remember. Just one thing. Anything. Emily swallowed hard, small hands gripping the edge of the stand. He had something in his pocket, she whispered. It smelled like the stuff the nurses use, and it had red on it, like before. Sarah leaned closer. Red? Emily nodded. On the cloth. Sarah's eyes flicked briefly toward Daniel, a wordless exchange of realization. The gauze. The defense attorney stood again, voice sharp. Objection. The witness is speculating. Overruled, the judge said quietly, gaze lingering on the little girl. There was something in his expression that wasn't quite legal formality. Something human. Emily lowered her head, exhausted, small shoulders trembling. The judge looked at Sarah. You may continue, but keep it brief. The witness has been through enough. Sarah nodded, voice softer now. Emily, one last question. When you were scared that night, what made you feel safe again? Emily's eyes drifted back toward the back of the room. Rex. Her answer was so simple, so pure, that even the reporters paused their typing. Rex blinked once, slow, solemn, and then rested his chin on his paws again. The courtroom was silent. Judge Morrison finally cleared his throat. The court will recess until 1 o'clock. The gavel struck once, sharp as a heartbeat. As everyone began to rise, Daniel stayed seated, his hand gently resting on Rex's back. The dog's muscles were tight, his posture still alert. You did good, Daniel whispered. You reminded her she wasn't alone. Rex's ears flicked back briefly, acknowledging him, before settling once more into stillness. At the front, Sarah Bennett closed her briefcase, eyes heavy but resolute. Emily was being led gently off the stand by a social worker. She glanced back one last time toward the back of the room, toward Rex. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the fear seemed to lift from hers completely. Outside, sunlight spilled across the courthouse steps, the first true light of morning breaking through the clouds. Inside, the truth was still fighting its way to the surface. And Rex, ever silent, ever watchful, sat poised in the shadows, waiting for what came next. The courtroom felt heavier after the recess, like the air itself knew something had shifted, but couldn't name it yet. The rain outside had stopped, but gray light still pressed against the windows, turning the chamber into a theater of shadows. Officer Daniel Hayes sat quietly in the back again, his hand resting on Rex's collar. The dog was calm but alert, gaze fixed forward. Every nerve in his body seemed wired, tuned to something no one else could feel. At the front, Dr. Alan Brooks sat with perfect posture, his composure almost unnerving. His lawyer, Mark Keller, adjusted his tie and turned to the jury with a faint, pitying smile. Ladies and gentlemen, Keller began smoothly, what we have here is not evidence, it's emotion. A frightened child, a grieving officer, and a courtroom willing to treat a dog's bark as divine revelation. A soft chuckle rippled through the spectators, but it died quickly when Keller's tone sharpened. Let's be honest. This trial has turned into theater. The prosecution wants you to believe that a dog can replace hard facts. What's next? Shall we swear him in? The jab landed like a slap. Daniel's jaw tightened. He could feel the burn of skeptical glances turned his way. Sarah Bennett, the prosecutor, stayed composed, but clenched her pen so tightly the plastic creaked. "Objection, Your Honor," she said firmly. "Defense is attempting to ridicule law enforcement procedure." Judge Morrison raised a hand. "Sustained. Mr. Keller, watch your tone." Keller smirked faintly. "Apologies, Your Honor. I only meant to highlight the creative liberties being taken. After all, unless Officer Hayes' K-9 partner can take the stand and testify under oath, his so-called instincts are meaningless in a court of law." The words hung in the air like a taunt. Daniel's breath slowed. He could feel Rex shift beside him, muscles tensing. Then, before anyone could react, Rex stood. A single sharp bark shattered the stillness. Every head turned. The dog's tail was stiff, ears forward, body suddenly electric with energy. He tugged at the leash once, hard. Daniel instinctively gripped it tighter. "Rex," he hissed quietly. "Easy." But Rex wasn't listening. His gaze was locked on the defendant's table, on Dr. Brooks. Another bark, louder this time, reverberated through the chamber. Brooks flinched slightly, though he quickly masked it behind a thin smile. "Control your animal, officer!" Keller snapped, half rising. Daniel tried to pull Rex back, but the dog lunged forward, dragging him down the aisle. Gasps erupted. The bailiff started forward, but Judge Morrison's voice rang out first. "Hold position. Let's see what's happening." Rex reached the defendant's table and began circling it, nose pressed close to the floor. His movements were precise, deliberate, a working dog on scent. "Rex," Daniel said again, heart pounding. "What are you doing, boy?" The shepherd ignored him. He stopped suddenly at the table's edge, then pushed his snout against the fabric lining beneath the defense bench. A low growl rumbled in his chest. Deep, resonant, certain. Rex pawed once, then again, harder. The sound of tearing fabric filled the courtroom as he clawed at the underside of the table, nose forcing its way into a gap. Something small and white tumbled out onto the floor. A bundle of medical gauze. The silence that followed was deafening. Keller froze mid-step, mouth half open. Brooks's hand twitched slightly against the armrest. Daniel knelt immediately, reaching for the object. His gloved fingers lifted it slowly. The gauze was stained faintly pink, with dried residue along one edge. Sarah Bennett was already on her feet. "Your Honor, request for immediate forensic inspection of that material." Judge Morrison's brow furrowed. "Granted. Bailiff, secure the item. No one touches it until verification." The bailiff sealed the gauze carefully before hurrying it to the forensic technician waiting outside the courtroom door. Keller tried to recover. "This is absurd," he said, voice rising. "A dog finds a random piece of trash, and suddenly it's Exhibit A?" Sarah turned, voice cutting like steel. "That random piece of trash, counselor, matches the description of the gauze used on the victim, found by a police K-9 trained to detect scent evidence." The judge's gaze turned icy. "Sit down, Mr. Keller." Keller opened his mouth to protest, but the door opened again. The forensic tech stepped inside, a slip of paper in hand. "Your Honor," she said, breathless. "The substance on the gauze matches the biological trace found on the victim's clothing. Exact chemical profile." The words dropped like thunder. Gasps filled the room. One juror covered her mouth. A reporter's pen clattered to the floor. Daniel stood frozen, adrenaline pulsing through his veins. Rex sat beside him again, calm now, eyes locked on Brooks. His breathing was steady, not triumphant, not aggressive, just certain. Dr. Brooks's calm mask finally cracked. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. Sarah turned slowly toward the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said quietly, "sometimes the truth doesn't speak in words." In the gallery, Emily had returned with her social worker to observe, her small figure half hidden behind the railing. When Rex looked her way, she stepped forward, hesitant, but brave. Her voice trembled, but it carried through the silence. Rex knew. The courtroom fell utterly still. Every eye turned toward the little girl, her small hand gripping the rail, face pale but determined. "Rex knew," she said again, louder this time. "He found it. He always knew." The words cracked open something in the room. Not applause, not outrage, but a quiet, collective breath. A shift. Judge Morrison's gavel came down once, sharp but restrained. "Order. The court will recess for further examination of the new evidence." As voices rose and guards moved to escort Brooks away, Daniel knelt beside Rex, hand pressed against his collar. "You did it, partner," he whispered, his throat tight. "You found the truth." Rex leaned into him, tail giving one small wag, not of pride but understanding. Emily wiped her tears and smiled faintly from across the room. For a brief, fragile moment, the walls of the courthouse didn't feel so cold. Outside, sunlight finally pierced the clouds, spilling through the high windows and landing directly on Rex's fur. A glimmer of light on the dog who had spoken without words and been believed. The storm had begun to break, but Daniel knew this was only the first wave. The storm that had been brewing inside the courtroom now raged outside it. Cameras flashed like lightning. Reporters crowded the courthouse steps, their voices a jumble of headlines, opinions, and accusation. "Officer Hayes, did your dog plant the evidence? Do you believe K9s should be treated as witnesses? Was this discovery staged?" The questions hit like hailstones, relentless, cold, and without mercy. Officer Daniel Hayes pushed through the swarm, his coat pulled tight against the gusting wind. Rex walked calmly beside him, unmoved by the chaos, head high, eyes steady. Every camera seemed to catch the same image, the weary cop and the loyal dog, side by side against a storm of doubt. A reporter shoved a mic forward. "Officer Hayes, do you have any comment about the claims that your K9 acted on staged cues?" Daniel stopped just long enough to meet the man's gaze. His voice was low but firm. "Rex doesn't follow politics. He follows truth." Then he turned and kept walking. Inside the precinct, the noise of the outside world dulled to a distant hum. The halls were dim, fluorescent lights flickering with that tired buzz that always seemed to accompany long nights. Daniel dropped his hat on the nearest desk and exhaled. The adrenaline had faded, leaving behind exhaustion and the echo of doubt. Half the department was calling him a hero. The other half thought he'd jeopardized the case by letting a dog lead the discovery. And Internal Affairs had already sent 2 emails requesting a full incident report for procedural review. Rex settled by his desk, curling into a quiet ball of fur and patience. Across the room, Detective Laura Miller leaned against the doorframe, coffee in hand. "You look like you've gone 12 rounds, with a hurricane." Daniel gave a dry laugh. "Feels about right." She stepped closer, her tone softening. "You know they'll spin this however they want. Some will say you broke protocol. Some will say you saved a child. You can't control it." He looked at her, eyes tired. "You ever get tired of doing the right thing and still getting questioned for it?" "Every day," she said simply. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Internal Affairs called again. They're reviewing the footage from the courtroom. They want to know if Rex was trained to signal falsely for emotional impact. Laura scoffed. "Emotional impact? What? They think your dog's an actor now? He sighed, rubbing his temples. They think people see what they want to believe. That maybe Rex reacted to me, not the evidence. And what do you think? She asked. He hesitated. I think they're scared of something they can't explain. Laura pulled a chair over, sitting across from him. You've been quiet since the hearing. This case is hitting you deeper than most. Daniel's gaze drifted to Rex, who had lifted his head slightly, ears twitching at the sound of his name. It's not just this case, he said softly. It's everything before it. Laura didn't speak. She knew that tone, the voice of a man haunted by ghosts. Daniel stared at the coffee cup in his hands. My first partner, Cooper, he was a canine too. Best I ever trained, smart, fearless. We were chasing an armed suspect through the docks one night. Cooper went ahead to corner him. The guy panicked and fired. His voice caught slightly, but he forced it steady. By the time I reached him, it was too late. Laura's expression softened. I'm sorry. Daniel nodded slowly. I told myself it was just the job, that I'd done everything I could. But I never stopped hearing it. That last bark, the one that wasn't command or alert. It was fear. He looked up at Rex again, eyes distant. When I got assigned to him, I swore I wouldn't let history repeat itself. But now, you think you're leading him down the same path, Laura finished quietly. He nodded. They don't see what he is, Laura. They see a tool. But he's more human than half the people I've worked with. He feels things we ignore. Laura leaned forward, voice gentle but firm. Then don't let them take that from you, or from him. You're not just fighting for a case, Daniel. You're fighting for what's right, for people who can't speak, and for partners who never will. He met her gaze. You think the truth's enough? Sometimes, she said. Truth doesn't need words. It just needs courage. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was grounding. Outside, the rain began again. Softer now. Steady. Cleansing. Daniel stood and walked to the window. The city lights blurred through the wet glass, glowing like distant stars swallowed by fog. Funny, he murmured, how quiet it gets after a storm. Laura smiled faintly. That's when you find out what's still standing. He turned to her, eyes thoughtful. You really believe that? I have to, she said. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this? They shared a look, unspoken understanding, not romantic, not forced, just two people carrying the same weight in different ways. After a moment, she rose. Go home, Hayes. Get some rest. You'll need it. Tomorrow's going to be worse. He gave a half smile. That's comforting. I'm not here to comfort you, she said with a smirk. I'm here to remind you you're not crazy. As she turned to leave, Rex stood and stretched, claws clicking softly against the floor. He walked over and nudged Daniel's leg, then looked toward the door. Daniel smiled faintly. You too, huh? Guess that's unanimous. Laura paused at the doorway, her tone quieter now. He's a good one, Daniel. Don't let the noise make you forget that. When she left, the room felt larger, emptier, but not lonely. Daniel sat back down, staring at the rain outside. The city moved like a blur beyond the glass, lives rushing by, headlines forming, stories spinning out of control. He looked down at Rex, who had settled by his side again, chin resting on his boot. The dog's eyes were calm, unwavering. You don't care what they say, do you? Rex blinked slowly. Daniel chuckled softly. Yeah, didn't think so. He reached down and rested a hand on Rex's head. You did what no one else could. You saw the truth, and I'm damn proud of you for it." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Not angry this time, but distant, fading. Inside, the bond between man and dog felt unbreakable, forged not in command or obedience, but in shared faith. As the clock ticked toward midnight, Daniel whispered the words that had carried him through every doubt, every loss, every storm. Sometimes, courage is just showing up again. Rex's tail thumped softly once against the floor, as if agreeing. And together, they sat in the quiet aftermath of chaos, ready for whatever came next. The courthouse was quieter than usual that morning. The press had been pushed outside, their cameras waiting beyond the marble steps. Inside, the air was tense but hushed, a silence that felt sacred, as though the walls themselves knew the weight of what was about to unfold. Emily Carter sat on a wooden bench outside the courtroom, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her pale yellow dress. Her hair was neatly brushed, a soft braid falling over one shoulder, but her eyes still carried that faraway look, the kind children have when they've seen too much of the world, too soon. Next to her, Officer Daniel Hayes crouched down, voice low and steady. "You ready, kiddo?" Emily hesitated. "What if I forget again?" "You won't," Daniel said gently. "Because you're not alone this time." At his side, Rex sat tall, harness gleaming, leash looped loosely in Emily's small hand. He watched her with quiet devotion, as though every breath she took was his command to guard. The courtroom doors creaked open, and Prosecutor Sarah Bennett appeared. "It's time," she said softly. Emily nodded. Her fingers tightened around the leash. Rex stood immediately, sensing her nervousness, pressing closer so she could feel his warmth. As they entered, all conversation ceased. The jury straightened, the defense stiffened. Even the judge adjusted his glasses, gaze softening at the sight of the small girl walking beside a police dog. Daniel remained at the back of the room, chest tight. He'd escorted witnesses before, hardened criminals, broken victims, professionals under pressure, but nothing felt heavier than watching a child carry her truth into a room full of strangers. Emily stepped up to the stand, Rex at her side. When the bailiff asked her to place her hand on the Bible, she hesitated, looking down at the dog. "Can he stay?" she whispered. The judge's voice, usually gruff, softened. "Yes, young lady, he may stay." Rex sat beside her chair, head held high, eyes locked on her like a sentry. Sarah approached the podium, voice calm but full of purpose. "Emily, do you remember why you're here today?" The little girl took a breath. "To tell the truth." "That's right," Sarah said with a gentle smile. "And do you feel ready to do that?" Emily glanced down. "I think so. Rex says it's okay." A few chuckles rippled softly through the audience. Not mocking, but tender, touched by the innocence in her tone. Sarah nodded. "All right, sweetheart. Can you tell us what happened the night Officer Hayes and Rex found you?" Emily's voice trembled at first, a quiver of fear beneath every word. "It was raining. I was in the alley. My leg hurt, and I was cold." Her hands shook, but she kept talking. "He told me not to scream, said no one would help me if I did. But then I heard barking, loud, like thunder." Rex's ears perked slightly at her voice. The movement steadied her. "I remember the light," she continued, voice clearer now. "And then Officer Hayes. He said, 'You're safe now. Rex and we've got you.'" Sarah's throat tightened, but she kept her composure. "And do you remember who hurt you, Emily?" Emily's fingers twisted the leash, The courtroom held its breath. She looked up, not frightened this time, but focused. It was him. Her small hand pointed toward Dr. Alan Brooks, sitting stiffly at the defense table. The doctor didn't move, but a flicker of tension crossed his face. The defense attorney, Mark Keller, rose immediately. "Objection, Your Honor. This child has been influenced. The presence of the dog—" "Overruled," Judge Morrison said quietly, gaze never leaving Emily. "Continue." Emily turned back towards Sarah, voice trembling again, but now from determination. He had something in his pocket. It smelled like the hospital, like medicine. It was red. Sarah nodded, gently leading her. "Do you remember what Rex did in court the other day?" A small smile touched Emily's lips. "He found it. The thing he tried to hide." "And how did that make you feel?" She looked down at Rex, who blinked up at her with patient eyes. "Safe." The room went silent. Sarah stepped back, expression tender but resolute. No further questions. Keller approached the stand, tone measured but edged. "Emily," he began, "you said you were scared that night. Is it possible you imagined some of the details?" Emily frowned. "No." "But it was dark, wasn't it?" he pressed. "And you were hurt. Maybe your mind filled in what you wanted to believe." Before Sarah could object, Emily answered, calm, certain. "I didn't imagine him. Rex didn't either." Keller hesitated, momentarily disarmed by the simplicity of her answer. Judge Morrison adjusted his glasses, expression unreadable but warm. "Mr. Keller, I think the witness has answered." The defense attorney exhaled and stepped back. Emily turned slightly, reaching for Rex. The dog placed his paw gently on her shoe. It wasn't rehearsed. It was instinct, pure and quiet. That single touch seemed to dissolve the courtroom's tension. Even the jurors softened, watching a bond that no cross-examination could diminish. Sarah stood again, moving toward the jury box for her closing statement. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, tone steady, reverent. "You've heard testimony from experts, officers, and witnesses. You've seen the evidence. But the truth you've witnessed here today isn't written in reports. It's written in the courage of a little girl, and the loyalty of a dog who never stopped believing her." She paused, letting the silence hold. "Sometimes," she continued, "the most loyal witness doesn't speak our language, but speaks to our hearts. And sometimes, that's the only language truth needs." The words lingered like a prayer. Emily looked up at her again, tears shining but unfallen. Rex nudged her hand gently, reminding her to breathe. Judge Morrison removed his glasses and wiped his eyes discreetly. Around the room, a few jurors did the same. Even the clerk looked down, blinking rapidly. Sarah gave a small nod toward Daniel, who sat in the back, watching with quiet pride. For a fleeting second, their eyes met. Two people who had fought for something fragile, and finally seen it stand on its own. Emily leaned down and whispered something into Rex's ear. The dog's tail moved once, slow and content. The gavel struck once, calling the court to order. "The jury will deliberate," the judge announced. "Court is adjourned until verdict." As everyone began to move, Daniel walked toward the front. He crouched beside Emily's chair, smiling softly. "You did great, kiddo." She beamed. A real smile this time, not the kind patched together to hide fear. "Rex helped me." Daniel looked at the shepherd, voice low. "He always does." As they stood to leave, sunlight broke through the clouds outside, spilling through the windows like a quiet blessing. The verdict hadn't been read yet, The fight wasn't over. But in that moment, the room no longer felt divided between sides. It felt human. And in the center of it all, a child and her protector walked side by side, carrying the kind of truth no verdict could erase. The courthouse clock ticked like a heartbeat, steady and relentless. Every second stretched thin as silk. The air inside the courtroom was heavy, not with noise, but with the unbearable quiet of waiting. Officer Daniel Hayes sat rigid in his seat, hands clasped tightly together. His knuckles were white, his pulse unsteady. Rex, ever patient, lay at his feet, amber eyes fixed on the front of the room where the jury box stood. The shepherd didn't understand the mechanics of human justice, but he understood tension, the rhythm of fear and faith that had filled this room for days. Emily Carter sat beside the prosecutor, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. The same yellow dress from her testimony, washed, ironed. She looked smaller than before, yet somehow stronger too. The kind of quiet strength that didn't need words to prove itself. The door behind the jury opened. A hush fell like a blanket. The 12 jurors filed back in, faces unreadable, footsteps slow. The foreman, a middle-aged man with tired eyes, held the verdict slip in trembling fingers. He handed it to the bailiff, who passed it to Judge Morrison. The judge read silently. For a moment, nothing. Only the faint rustle of paper, the creak of the bench beneath him. Then he cleared his throat. His voice, though formal, carried the faintest tremor of emotion. In the matter of the state versus Dr. Alan Brooks, a pause, a heartbeat. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. The words broke through the air like thunder. For a moment, the courtroom was still. No one breathed. Then, a soft, collective exhale. Relief, disbelief, vindication. Emily's lip quivered. She turned toward Rex, and before anyone could stop her, she slipped off her chair and threw her arms around the dog's neck. "Thank you," she whispered, voice muffled against his fur. "Thank you for finding me." Rex stayed perfectly still, as though understanding the magnitude of her words. His tail gave one slow, steady wag, and his head tilted, pressing softly against her shoulder. Daniel felt his throat tighten. His vision blurred. Not from exhaustion this time, but from the swell of emotion that came when justice, after so much darkness, finally took form. He rose quietly, standing straighter than he had in days. His hand went instinctively to his heart, and then, in a small, solemn gesture, he lifted it in salute. It wasn't the kind of salute given to a superior or command. It was the salute of a soldier to another who had fought beside him, an acknowledgement of loyalty beyond language, of courage without ego. Rex turned his head slightly at the motion, eyes calm, steady. The eyes of a creature who didn't understand verdicts or politics, but who had always known truth. From the gallery, someone began to clap. It was soft at first, hesitant, almost uncertain. Then another joined, and another. Within seconds, the courtroom was filled with quiet applause. Not the roaring kind of victory, but the respectful kind. The sound of hearts moved, not entertained. Judge Morrison, breaking his usual stoic demeanor, allowed himself a small smile. He didn't call for silence. Not this time. Some moments, he knew, deserved to breathe. Across the aisle, Dr. Brooks sat frozen. His attorney whispered urgently, but the words seemed to wash over him. For the first time since the trial began, his perfect composure cracked. His hands trembled slightly as the bailiff approached to take him into custody. Daniel watched without triumph. Justice wasn't joy. It was weight lifted, but not forgotten. He turned his gaze back to Emily. She was still kneeling beside Rex, fingers buried in his fur, tears shining in her eyes. Yet her face was peaceful now. For the first time since that night in the alley, she looked like a child again. Safe, seen, believed. Sarah Bennett approached quietly, kneeling beside them both, hand on Emily's shoulder. "You were very brave," she said softly. Emily smiled faintly. "He was braver." Sarah glanced at Rex, then at Daniel, and nodded. "Maybe. But he couldn't have done it without you." Daniel stepped closer. "Or without you," he added, voice warm but rough with emotion. For a long moment, the four of them, man, woman, child, and dog, stood there in the middle of the courtroom, surrounded by the echo of gentle applause and the glow of late-morning light filtering through tall windows. It was the kind of silence that followed not victory, but healing. Rex shifted slightly, moving toward the front of the room, where the American flag stood behind the judge's bench. He sat beneath it, tall and still, his coat gleaming gold in the light. The photographers, too respectful to break the moment, simply watched. No one had to frame the picture. It framed itself. Rex beneath the flag. Emily beside him, hand on his back. Daniel standing behind them, head bowed. It was more than an ending. It was a promise. That courage in its truest form doesn't need words or applause. It just stands quietly in the light, unbroken. Judge Morrison rose. His voice was low, but firm. "This court is adjourned." The gavel struck once, sharp, final, echoing through the chamber. Daniel turned toward Rex again, chest swelling with pride. He knelt beside him, resting a hand on his collar. "You did good, partner," he murmured. "Better than any of us." Rex's eyes met his, calm, knowing. He didn't wag his tail this time. He didn't need to, because some victories are too sacred for celebration. As the courtroom began to empty, Daniel lingered for a moment longer, watching the child and the dog standing side by side under the flag. The sun caught the polished badge on his chest, the glint of light landing across Rex's fur like a shared medal. Faith, loyalty, truth. Three things that didn't need to be spoken to be understood. The applause had faded, but the feeling in the room, the quiet recognition that something pure had triumphed, remained. And in that silence, the bond between a wounded child, a weary cop, and a loyal dog felt larger than justice itself. It felt like redemption. The morning mist rolled over the riverside trail, soft and pale beneath the first blush of dawn. Officer Daniel Hayes walked slowly, the gravel crunching beneath his boots. Beside him, Rex moved in quiet rhythm, a soldier off duty. The leash between them hung loose. They no longer needed it. The air smelled of pine and wet earth. For the first time in months, there was no noise in Daniel's head. Only peace. He glanced at Rex, whose fur glowed faintly in the dim light. "It's quieter now," he murmured. Rex looked up, eyes calm as if to say, "You've earned it." They reached the clearing overlooking the river, their place after hard calls. Daniel sat on the bench. Rex lay at his feet. Then came light footsteps. Laughter. Emily Carter ran toward them, taller now, eyes bright again. "Officer Hayes! Rex!" Rex's tail thumped as she dropped to her knees, hugging him. "I missed you," she said. "Mom said you're back on duty." Daniel smiled. "Just mornings like this." Emily pulled a folded paper from her backpack. "I made something for him." Daniel opened it. A drawing of Rex with angel wings, beneath the words, "My hero." His breath caught. "Those are his wings," Emily said. Because he saves people. Daniel swallowed hard. Yeah, he whispered. He does. Emily pressed the drawing against Rex's chest. See? That's you. Rex gave a soft huff, making her laugh. Daniel rested a hand on his partner's back. You did good, buddy, he murmured. When Emily noticed his eyes shining, she smiled. It's okay, she said gently. Heroes cry sometimes. The church bell rang in the distance as sunlight broke through the trees. Emily took Daniel's hand. Will Rex keep helping people? As long as someone needs him, he said. She hugged Rex once more. You're my hero. Then she walked down the trail, her figure fading into the light. Daniel looked at Rex, the golden fur shimmering. We did something right, he said. Rex sat tall, gazing at the sunrise. The flag at the nearby memorial fluttered softly. Justice isn't always loud, Daniel murmured. Sometimes it's a heartbeat and a loyal bark in the silence. You know, stories like this remind us why dogs aren't just animals. They're family, especially German shepherds, brave, loyal, and deeply human in the way they love us back. They don't ask for words or rewards. They just know when we need them most. Rex's story isn't really about heroism or headlines. It's about connection. That quiet bond between a human heart and a loyal soul who never judges, never leaves, and always believes in us, even when the world doesn't. If this touched you, maybe take a moment to learn a little more about how to build that same trust and understanding with your own dog. There's a wonderful resource I've been reading, full of insights about communication, empathy, and training through love, and I think you'd truly enjoy it. No pressure, of course. Just something worth exploring if you want to see your dog not as a pet, but as a partner in life. Because at the end of the day, love, especially the kind that wags its tail, is what keeps us human.